Hi, Bob Bartlett here with the Ubuntu Fly Anglers Network and iFishiBelong, and the host of our podcast series, On the Reel. For those of you who are not familiar with us, we are a small group of black and brown fly anglers, environmental activists, and educators from across the country and Canada. It is an attempt to get real with our guests on matters that mean the most to them as black and brown folks. This podcast is consistent with our mission to make visible folks like us who live the outdoor life. Hi there, everyone. Bob Bartlett here with the Ubuntu Fly Anglers Network and your host of this episode of On the Reel. On this episode, I sat down with good friend and owner of Red Truck Fly Fishing, James Park. James shares his personal story of growing up the son of Korean immigrants in Los Angeles in the early 70s, his early introduction to running a business, and his introduction to fishing with conventional gear. James's business aspirations and fishing evolution really took off once he found himself in San Francisco. James shares his stories of the powerful moments that led him to ultimately buy Red Truck Fly Fishing and later move his young family and his business to Sacramento. He ends the interview with some words of wisdom for those who aspire to be fly fishing business owners like himself and fishing his home water, the American River in downtown Sacramento. We are sure you'll enjoy this unique episode of On the Reel with our good friend, James Park. So thanks for listening and or watching, and hope to see you downstream. Bye for now. Okay, hi everybody. Bob Bartlett here with the Ubuntu Fly Anglers Network and your host of this episode of On the Reel. That's R-E-A-L, not to be confused with the other one. On the Reel is consistent with our mission to make visible people like us who chase fish on the fly and also who help others get it done. So today I'm really happy, excited to sit down with James Park, California fly angler and business owner. Welcome to the show, James. Appreciate you being here.
Glad to be here. Thank you, Bob.
You're welcome. I've been anxious for this for the longest time. You and I did spend a little bit of time a while ago. We found that we have a lot of mutual interest. I'm really happy to have this time with you. So, James, for the sake of those who are going to listen to this and not watch the show, how do you self-identify?
Ethnically, I'm Korean. I come from a family of 5, 2 parents and 2 older sisters, all of which were born in Korea. And awesome. I was the only person in my immediate family born here in the United States. So I grew up very Korean American in Southern California.
So tell me a little bit about your place of origin as far as California goes. I know you spent a lot of time in California growing up.
I was born and raised in a coastal community down in the southern part of Los Angeles. Not many Asian people around me growing up. It was interesting. My parents came in 1972 to the United States, which for Korean immigration pool, so to speak, they were really early. Although Koreans had come to Hawaii and parts of South America and parts of California and New York, at that point, there was only under 20,000 Koreans that had immigrated to the U.S. at that point. They came pretty early and didn't find that community themselves because it really didn't exist. Los Angeles' Koreatown was just starting off. They raised us very Korean, but not with a lot of Korean people very close to us in our geographical proximity.
Yeah, that eventually changed over time, though, right?
By the time I got to high school, so it took 15 years before just the couple of families that looked like us turned into, I think at that time, almost 20% of my high school became Asian, which was huge. But that also created identity problems in itself. Your first, through youth, being 1 or 2 Asian kids in the class or the school and kind of finding where you fit in. And then by the time high school comes around and all these kids have come in and they see each other and group up. But then there's those kind of original guys that are like, do I fit in with them? Or do I fit in more with my friends that I grew up with, or so that was a whole different bag to deal with.
In my hometown of 3,500 people in the backwoods of Appalachia, 3,500 people and a small black population. Now, the difference was Jim Crow kept us segregated, but I not knowing that other black folks didn't hunt and fish. I thought all black people did that, right? Because everybody in my hometown owned guns for hunting and fished, and because it was a way of feeding the family. And so it wasn't until I was a young adult and actually met black folks from the city that do we have anything in common besides the color of our skin? And the saying out of the neighborhood was, skin don't make us kin. Yeah, I appreciate that struggle, bro, because I've had a little bit of that, and I think just about everyone non-white in America has had that experience to some extent. Okay, so you were born and raised there. Now, you told me a great story about Dad and the business that he had in LA.
Interestingly, kind of going with the theme again, my dad, he kind of danced to his own drummer a little bit. He didn't go into the typical Korean immigration businesses. It was retail and corner stores and dry cleaners. And he got into a men's clothing business that was based in Hawthorne, California, which some people know and some people don't, but Hawthorne, it's actually the town where the Beach Boys came from. So historically, it was a very suburban, middle-class, American town in Los Angeles, close to the beach, only a few miles from the beach. And during the 70s and 80s, huge black community and Hispanic community came in, which back then was who left town right away. So my father took over a business in that kind of community. And to him, it wasn't a big deal. And ironically, nobody wanted to buy this business because of that.
Sure.
And when he came in, he literally took a look, and within an hour of seeing the business, he actually went there to go visit the owner, had no idea the business was even available. And the owner's like, I want to get out of this. Within an hour, my dad made some kind of deal and said, I'll take over. The previous owner was shocked, like, why would you do that? Everyone's been running. And he said, well, we're all human. We all got to wear clothes. We all want to look good. Nobody wakes up in the morning saying, man, I want to look bad today. So he said none of that mattered to him. So he took over this business that in Los Angeles, again, during the early 80s into the 90s, he was very accepted into that community because, number one, he had no judgment. Number two, he employed a lot of these folks. They became our family. To this day, we keep in touch with a lot of them, and they are literally our family. He had also experienced some racism when he first came to America, so he understood even more so that it was nonsense, really. And he kind of became known in the black community. And again, 70s, 80s. So the black community in general in Los Angeles was growing in the public eye positively, right? Whether it was ridiculous reasons or really positive reasons. Professional athletes, entertainment in general. There were TV shows finally where it was like a all colored person, a cast, and things like that started happening. So he kind of grew a name in that community. Would take pictures with people because people told him, that's Muhammad Ali, take a picture. He's like, he's been shopping here for a long time. Or in the 90s, it turned into Snoop Dogg and Warren G and the Long Beach guys, because by then he had a couple stores, and it would be like the mall would shut down because Snoop would be coming in, and he'd be like, I've known Calvin since he was a kid. And he didn't get caught up in any of that. For him as an immigrant, it was like, I got to pay my bills. I grew up like a lot of Korean immigrant children. I grew up since I was a kid, going to the store, learning how to do accounting in the books, learning how to run a cash register. When I was 10, 11, 12, I was literally taping people up, getting their measurements, because my dad would sell the suit and my mom was in the back tailoring the suits. And even though they were employees, we were immigrant children. We had to help. So when we weren't busy, we'd be at the store, which was virtually every weekend. And we would learn how to run the business. So my sisters and I all kind of went through that.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that story so much. We talked a lot about it, and I really appreciate it. But I also wanted you to tell it because, at least from my perspective, that's what led you to be the person that you are, that upbringing in that environment and learning that business that led you to later do what you do and how you do it. And so I don't want to get too far ahead here, but thank you for sharing that, because I think that's a very important story that led into where you are now. And we'll get to that. I don't want to buzzkill it. But
no, interestingly, my father used to say, and this was kind of a cultural thing, and I guarantee you every Korean American kid who came from immigrant parents, which is a majority of us, you were given 2, maybe 3 options as a kid. You become a doctor, you become a lawyer, and worst case scenario, you become an engineer. Those were your options. Every Korean kid has this story. My mom and dad would say to me, and I think it's because they knew my personality, even though they wanted that for me, they would slip into their things like, but the only way to really make it in this country is if you do your own business. And I remember from a very early age asking my father particularly why. He said, you will never be accepted in this country as one of them. So even though you were born here, and again, I'm a kid, so I have to understand this early. That's been a theme that's always just, it's not a conscious thing, but it's just part of who I am. Yeah. I'll tell you, when I was a kid, I knew I wasn't going to be a doctor or a lawyer, in the worst case scenario, an engineer. I kind of always had it in me to just learn how to hustle.
So how did fishing into your life? Did you grow up fishing?
Yeah, so my father, again, being kind of who he was, he got into scuba diving in the 70s. Which was wild, because not only wasn't it a popular thing amongst people in general, there was very few Asian guys doing it. He got into it passionately, more than just recreation. He got an education behind the science of scuba diving. So he was always very astute, a super smart guy. He dove into the deep end of scuba diving, I've seen an essay he wrote, hundreds of pages, about the propulsion of fins. The equivalent of our industry or sports, like Lefty or Trey Combs and these guys. They're just so passionate about it that they want to explore every avenue of it. So sure. I grew up watching my father dive, and one of his purchases was a little dive boat, and I would have to be on the boat to make sure that the oxygen, because he wouldn't use tanks, he would use a generator that would pump oxygen into a hose for him.
Wow.
So I had to stay on the boat starting at 6 years old to make sure the engine didn't run out of gas. So being a kid, I naturally would get bored. Immediately, I learned how to fish. So all of our trips, we would leave in the morning, go straight to Catalina Island. He would go down and I would fish. He would take me maybe once a month to the local tackle shop. And he didn't care about it, but he wanted the employees and the people at the shop to teach me how to rig things and teach me techniques for different species. Now, keep in mind, kind of like you mentioned how you grew up, for us, that was food. We ate it. But it wasn't recreational in terms of the sporting side of it. So he would bring up crazy things from the ocean, sea cucumbers and abalone and urchins and 10 different kind of fish. We grew up needing that. So not needing it or we'll go hungry, but a lot of it was ingredients my parents left in Korea. You saw sea cucumber at the supermarket. I learned how to fish, and I got very passionate about it from 6 years old, learning how to just catch saltwater species from a boat. My first freshwater fish I ever really caught, my first trout, didn't happen till I was probably around 22 or 23 years old.
Wow.
And up until then, I'd caught hundreds of species and thousands of fish, but never a freshwater fish.
That's interesting. California is a unique place for that sort of thing to happen. And some of my friends down there, they pull their way home and fish the surf. Or it's like, that's so different. I was out yesterday on a mountain stream and locally here and catching cutthroat and thinking, I know I actually was thinking about that, what it would be like if I had grown up on the ocean. A whole different experience. How did fly fishing enter into the scene? Did that happen in LA or did that happen somewhere else?
So in 1998, I moved to San Francisco, finished my education. That was a city I always wanted to live in. I got into trout fishing and bass fishing when I moved up there, mainly because, number one, even though I could go on party boats and stuff to go saltwater fishing, growing up with a boat was nice because we can just go. So I couldn't afford it. And the beaches in San Francisco were so different than Los Angeles. It wasn't really conducive to fishing in my eyes back then.
Okay.
So I want to make that a point. But to me, as an early 20s kid, I didn't think that I can fish from the beaches there. So I kind of just naturally wanting to fish got into bass and trout. And I remember as a kid going to shows, boat shows and scuba shows and fishing shows, like at convention centers, there'd always be a casting pond. And there'd always be like some old dudes wearing Orvis vests with gear out to here and casting fly rods. I had zero desire to learn to do it, to want to do it. I just had no desire. It looked too funny. It didn't look effective to me, and I had no desire. When I was in San Francisco, a girlfriend at the time, for a birthday present, had purchased a guided fishing trip for me, knowing that I loved fishing. Ends up, it was a guided fly fishing trip.
Oh.
The day before we started, the guide called me, super nice guy. But even then, I was kind of like, I can't believe I got to go fly fishing. Still no desire. Next morning, meet the guy on a trail, the base of a trail, and he hands me some waders. And he's standing next to his car, kind of rigging things up. And as I was putting on the waders, I'll never forget this. I had this weird kind of nostalgic feeling of putting on a wetsuit. So growing up on the beaches in Los Angeles, surfing and swimming, and I had a job on the ocean. It was just part of that nostalgic feeling of putting something on before I'm getting into water.
Sure.
And then, I will always remember that feeling. And then we walked down to the river. We started picking up rocks, looking at the bugs, and kind of like just cruising along, taking his time. And waders, I want to go jump in the water, fishing. But he's like, let's check it out a little bit. And again, that nostalgic feeling came over of getting to the beach and checking the waves and seeing where you're going to paddle out and checking things out before you just run down. Just had this overwhelming feeling of just like, well, okay, maybe this is okay. I'll give it a little
shot. Okay,
yeah. And then we walked out. He's like, okay, let's take a couple steps in. He showed me how to roll cast. Again, just immediately I took to it. It was, I'm not saying that it was this natural thing, but the way he instructed me made it very simple, and I was able to do it. And suddenly he'd say, like, I want you to hit the seam, and use words that I think most people wouldn't recognize, but being a fisherman and also growing up on water, it all kind of just started making sense right away. And within a few minutes, we caught this huge rainbow trout that I was like, this is by far the biggest rainbow I've ever caught. And I caught it on a fly rod, the first fish I ever caught. And I just remember that feeling of, this is it. This is the only way to catch fish now. You have that moment. Literally.
That's awesome.
It was like, I get one of these things. And I think a lot of people, obviously not everyone, but I think a lot of fly fishermen who are like us have that moment where this is what I want to do.
I know what you're saying, like the bolt of lightning, a spiritual experience happens. And next thing you know, you're deep into it.
So kind of to segue into that, literally within 24 hours of that first time fly fishing, we went home to San Francisco, and the first thing I did, because this is pre-Google on the phone, right? I immediately contacted the local fly shop in San Francisco.
Yeah, you were smitten.
Oh, yeah. And I made an appointment. So I didn't even own a rod or anything. This is within one day. I called them and said, I heard with fly fishing, you can tie your own flies.
Okay.
I would like to sign up for that class. And again, it's just in my brain, seared forever. The guy I spoke to, his name's Keith Westra. We're still great friends. Keith is well known in Northern California and beyond. He's like, yeah, I'm the instructor. Come on in tomorrow and I'll teach you. I get their address, and it ends up their address is like 1.5 blocks away from my office in San Francisco. So like you mentioned before, once a week, they were lucky if they only saw me once a week. I was literally there every single day. Every single day. I became friends with a lot of the shop guys. I would notice like the same customers pretty much come around, but then like people would come to me and ask me like, hey, what should we use here and there, thinking I worked for the shop. Because every time they were there, they'd see me. And then the reps from the companies started coming in, and they'd be like, hey, James, we're doing the meeting now. Come sit down. And kind of a running joke, because I was just a customer. All the shop guys were like, yeah, James, come on over. And I literally dove head first, no hands behind my back. I dove in. San Francisco, we had one of the most prestigious casting clubs in the world right next to my house. So that was easy. So whether it was work or home, I was surrounded by fly fishing. I'd go to the casting pools, and the old school guys would see how passionate I am, and they would take me under their wing and say, we're going to teach you how to properly cast, so not cast to just cast. So they would instruct me, and then I'm fly tying and learning about product just because I'm there all the time at the shop. Eventually, Keith, who was the manager, eventually he's like, why don't you just come in on Saturday you have off? Because keep in mind, I have my own business in San Francisco. That should have been my priority. But he said, you're here all the time. We can give you employee discounts, and the reps they already know you. 1 or 2 Saturdays a month, I would come in and help people rig and work the register, answer anyone's questions. And then funny enough, one day, I get a phone call while I'm in my office, and I get this frantic phone call from the shop. Hey, we're not really supposed to share this, but we don't know what to do. We're starting a rod company, and the people we're doing with business just showed up at the shop. We don't know what to tell them. And I was like, what do you mean? And they said, they're Korean. So I was like, no problem. 1.5 blocks. I literally hung up the phone, went to the shop, introduced myself to the Koreans. And by then, I'm technically an employee. Introduced myself, and this army of Korean men were looking at me like, who the heck are you? And I tell them, oh, Americans don't realize that it's important, that you should have known I help them, and I'm an employee. But yeah, these are my people. How can I help you? And they had some business they had to do. So I kind of was able to put myself in a position to just middleman that, hold both sides' hands a little bit, and make this launch of this company happen. So after that, the Koreans just kind of were like, who are you? In all of our 30 business, we haven't met a Korean American fly fisherman who knew the business side of things. So they just started calling me. I still had my relationship with the shop, and just kind of steamrolled into an opportunity where, although I had my own business, I was able to do some consulting for fly fishing companies as well as manufacturers.
Kind of giving me goosebumps here. It's amazing when those organic things happen, and you look back years later and go, that was not just a coincidence. There was some divine intervention in there.
Well, so it wasn't even a business. I literally I kind of consider it an early life crisis. I owned a recruiting firm, and I was just sick of interviewing people and cold calling businesses, and I was sick of San Francisco, the city I loved. What I didn't love at the time, and the time in my life, was I was sick of the social problems we had, the homelessness. I see this happening a lot in the West Coast. Is I'm pretty open-minded, but it got to a point where it was just chaos. You can't let people go to the bathroom in your business's stoop and it's okay. You can't let people pass out in front of your house with needles in their arms and it's okay. Like, you just can't. It just wasn't a good place like it used to be. I kind of had this moment of, I just want to leave. What was I going to do? I took a year off to go fishing, right? That's what I did. I took a year off to go fishing. And during my travels, that Korean company, the manufacturers, called me and said, hey, there's a couple brands out there that we think would want to talk with you and maybe help them even understand our business and our culture a little bit more as a Korean business. One brand in particular, Swedish-based brand, would like to meet you. At that time, I was in New Zealand, and I didn't know how long I was going to be there. I initially thought 2 weeks, and 9 weeks later, I finally left. I didn't know, but I made arrangements with them and said, when do you want me in Korea? And I will make arrangements to fly in and out of a certain airport if you can get me the dates. So they did. It was agreed upon. In a couple months, I'd be in them leaving Bangkok, Thailand, to go meet them. I had Australia. I had a couple more places that I needed to fish before I got there. But sure enough, I got into Bangkok, flew to Korea, did some work with a couple European brands. Before I left to go back to Bangkok, the Swedish company kind of said, well, hey, whenever you're done, we would like you to come back to the U.S. and help us relaunch our brand in the U.S. So no pressure, take your time, figure out where you'll be for more than a couple weeks, and we'll send you fishing gear. And I was like, okay, so for me, it kind of just, again, it just naturally developed into that. And obviously, during this trip, it was my time to figure out what was next in life. Early on in my trip, realized that I can enjoy the rest of the trip, and that when I get back to the U.S., I will have at least an opportunity to help out a business. And it just happened to be in fly fishing. About 7 or 8 months after that, I did go back and I was able to work with this brand for several years. During that time, I was working with that brand. The folks at Red Truck, kept in good touch with them. They were still all my friends. Half of them were fishing buddies. Jokingly, they would say things like, hey, it'd be great if you can help us out and come back eventually. Or doors always open. Kind of after several years with this Swedish brand, I was able to help out Red Truck again. Just a few years after that, I had the opportunity to take over the business and the company. Because I got to see the rods and the development of the brand literally from day one.
Sure, yeah.
And then kind of weave my way through it, manage the brand to some capacity to eventually becoming the owner. And that's been 6 years now.
San Francisco, and you're now where?
Yeah. We're now in Sacramento, so now I'm married, couple kids, 13 and 9-year-old boys. I love it here in Sacramento. I'll be honest, Sacramento was one of the places that if you asked me 20 years ago, would you ever move to Sacramento? It would have been a very clear no. We love where we live. We live in a town called Roseville. I drive 1 hour in any direction. Generally within 20 minutes, I have water. But if I go to 1 hour in any direction, I've got amazing fishing. The delta that's connected to the ocean here, countless rivers, countless lakes. We lose count easily. It's endless. And I feel like I live in one of the best places for a fisherman in this state, for sure.
So do you have a particular place that your go-to place? Someone said, yeah, James is on his home water. Where would that be?
I would nowadays call it the American River here in Sacramento. A legendary river. It's known for years. It's been known as one of the best urban fisheries in the country. I will be honest, when we first moved here, I avoided that place because back then there was a lot of car break-ins, big drug problems. I didn't feel personally unsafe, but I didn't like my car getting broke into every time. For about 9 years, I didn't fish that river at all. And it's only 25 minutes away. About 6 years ago, I took my family down there and they cleaned it up. everything was different. They built a beautiful bike path through the length of the river, and it was just it was a whole different place again, kind of like back in the day when I used to fish there. So it's kind of been, I'd say like 80% of the time, if I only have a few hours, I'm going down to the American.
What's been your biggest takeaway from being a business owner, because you no longer have a storefront business, you operate differently now than you did?
Fly fishing in general is at a point, so this is from an industry perspective versus the business side of things versus the recreational side of it.
Yeah.
The numbers don't lie. Fly fishing is not rapidly growing. We had that huge movie, with Brad Pitt, a life-saving thing that happened to this industry. Because even back then, it was on the decline. Kind of rejuvenated the industry. And then after that initial bump, and it's been declining again, we have this thing called COVID, which obviously, as catastrophic as it was from the sense of business, there was no outdoor activity that didn't explode. You couldn't get an RV. You couldn't get a fishing rod. You couldn't get a bicycle. Whole world became fishermen. So the industry, again, we had this bump. And at the time, the industry was out of itself for something they didn't create. Now that people are going back to work, physically, right, in the last year or two, the remote thing is kind of over and people have less time and they weren't the ultra nerds like you and me who dove in way deep. Industry's been on a decline. The one thing that I take away from it is that the positive is the people that do it and have become passionate about it, they'll keep it alive to whatever level they can, whether it's just their grandkids or a nephew or a niece, or there's enough joy and there's enough gooey, happy feelings that it brings, that there's enough of those people that will, maybe the industry will suffer, but the hobby and the recreational part of it will continue. I sometimes get wrapped up too much in the business side of things, which I should, but I sometimes have to take a step away and just remind myself, my youngest son's first fish. That's what I play over and over in my head, is just that pure joy. Get that from his iPad. He didn't get that from some game or the memory he'll have forever. And if I can continue to share that with people, and not only myself, but people like you and other passionate fly anglers, I think my takeaway is that it will be here to stay, and it will be always handled respectfully and responsibly.
I know people who know you, and every one of them speaks so fondly of you. A couple in particular that I know and have spent time on Zoom calls with, Frank Vargas down in LA. Frank speaks highly of you. You've had a huge impact on the industry because of who you are. Brandon, Running Bear.
Sure.
Brandon, we're on a Zoom call together fairly recently because we do this refresh hour once a month, which, by the way, you're always invited to if you ever have the spare time. I know your time is limited, but we just meet and talk, and we meet new people all the time. It's an Ubuntu refresh hour, no agenda. So Brandon was on the call one night, never met him before, and talking about how he got into doing his thing as a guide and all that. Oh, well, James Park took me aside and like, okay, you've had a huge influence, not just through your store, through your business, but just because of who you are. And that's what drew me to you, as I kept hearing your name pop up here and there. Dudley Edmondson, sure. Dropped your name, and we did the fly rod exchange and got that into some hands. You're more than a business person. You're a very giving person with your time, and you've given it to me on a couple different occasions. But the fact that you've helped other people figure this out and get into business, even though you said, not a growing business, it is something that you see the spark in people's eye, and you see the skip in their step when talking about fly fishing. Absolutely, we had to bump with A River Runs Through It. And as you pointed out, that history is real. And the fact that we are where we are is a reflection of the times. But people who have it in their bones, in their soul, to be good stewards of the industry, good stewards when it comes to the environment and helping people get into it, that will live on forever. But I know you've gone from having a storefront to doing it the way you're doing it, which is kind of a trend that's out there. And that's that resilient piece. That's the piece we love so much. A little bit about your one of your favorite stories, fly fishing stories, and that's seeing your son, catch his first fish. That's a very common theme that runs through many of us. Is not only do we remember when we caught our first fish, but seeing the joy and seeing other people catch their first fish.
Yeah.
That is special, especially when it's a family member, your own blood. And I'm very lucky to have 8 grandchildren, and at least, some are babies, but all the older ones fly fish. Our 4 grown kids, they all fly, except for one, he's a photographer, but the rest of them all fly fish, and we do it together, and there's just nothing like it in the world. Let me ask you this. This is the part of On the real part. What, if anything, in the industry would you like to see change?
Honestly, from the business perspective of things, nothing that screams at me. I mean, there are obviously some things, but there are things that can't really be controlled because of the way the world works now, the way that business is conducted, the way that people think now. I mean, it's a constant changing thing. And with social media, and I started college with no internet. I'm kind of that cusp. My age group at around 50, we're that cusp of where we didn't have that access, and let alone tablets and phones that do what they do. That came well into my later part of my 20s, early 30s. So I grew up still loving the outdoors and still appreciating all that kind of stuff. But what's changed is more social stuff.
Yeah, sure.
The things that I would change on the business front can't really be helped. A lot of the fly fishing businesses now are owned by big financial investment firms. They're not owned by individuals who are passionate about fly fishing. A couple of the bigger companies are now bought from companies that have nothing to do with the outdoors, but they get tax credits for being carbon neutral. It's turned into that. I have no problems with that. That's how the world turns. But there are some things that on more of the social cultural side that are challenging.
Let's hear about that.
Like on social media, I don't celebrate having to catch only big fish. This is, again, it's a fly fishing problem. It's a people problem. It's so ego driven now, and it's become so individual, attention seeking. Sometimes people do it right and they can be positive and create positivity with it. And sometimes it spirals into something that's really ugly. But that attention seeking is rampant. And I've literally, just as recently as 2 days ago, I spoke to a gentleman here in Northern California. He caught my attention on social media. I reached out to him. He was so grateful. And the amount of how grateful he was threw me off a little bit. And I can tell he was a younger person. And maybe I was thrown off just because I haven't heard some younger guy who was so appreciative. But we spoke, and he's from Virginia, and he moved to California and always wanted to fly fish. But the first thing he realized is how intimidating it is. And I said, the gear and all this and the barriers to entry. He's like, none of that. It was when he'd go to the rivers and how the fly fishermen would treat him. And he said, I felt like I was beneath them because I had a spinning rod. The way they treated me was just so like uppity. And I get that. He said he's met great people too, but he was intimidated because the young man, he didn't know if he would look stupid. And we all go through that in points in life, but he was really emphasizing that he's the type of guy that will go out and try new stuff, and he doesn't really care what people judge about him. And once he started feeling that way, he realized, like, this isn't who I am.
Yeah.
I just want to try this thing. So he did. Ironically, his social media is growing, and now the fly anglers are coming out of the woodwork, and it's like, I saw you out there. You're great. Or, hey, can you tell me where you caught that fish? And now they're all coming out. I told him straight up, I would like to hook up with you and go fish with you sometime. Immediately, he's like, I don't know if I can fish with you, and you're probably so good. And I'm like, I'll throw spinning gear. I like to just be out there and fish. I prefer 99.9% of the time to do it with the fly rod. But I said, take it as an opportunity for us to kind of share and show each other what's up. And I can show you a couple tricks maybe here and there. That kind of thing is not going to help us grow. That attitude of these other people, I'm not blaming them. I do think a lot of it has to do with how social media has created these narratives that if it's not this big, it doesn't count. You held the fish incorrectly. You can educate the person without being vicious about it.
Sure, absolutely.
Those common grounds that held us together pre-social media have just gone away.
I reminded of this by people in the social media world. It's all about algorithms, Bob. Algorithms. What's your insights? How many followers? That's the least of my concern, but it's part of the business now, as you said.
For me, I have to do it.
Sure, yeah.
That's how I do my marketing. One thing I'm proud of with our social media is it's all 100% user content. These are my customers, guides that fish our stuff, my friends, people that support us. They send me pictures every day. Every day I get dozens of pictures from people who want to share their excitement. And I think that's how I haven't gotten jaded quicker. Yeah, I have this group of people that are so passionate about it, and it makes me so happy that I just want to continue building that joy. I was telling someone this morning, I've had guys who call me and are like, I made this cool video and we're all fishing your stuff and it's for so-and-so cooking company, but do you want to use it? And I'll be like, absolutely. So I've been very lucky that the community brand has built, but it's very challenging.
What advice would you give to someone who wants to do what you do, who wants to guide, wants to get in, wants to own their own business? Would you tell them to run away like their hair's on fire? Would you? I mean, what do you? If someone
not joking? Yes. I think at the end of the day, if you are already at that point where you're like, this is what I want to do, you're going to figure it out. I will be the first to tell you there will be tremendous sacrifices. You're going to want to give up. It's not easy. I will tell them all that. But in reality, any industry, any job, any profession,
for sure.
That story doesn't change. If you are passionate about it and you are determined to do it, then I will give them the best advice I can, which is always just comes down to business points. Because even though it's passion, and even though it's an emotional thing that you're attached to that you want to do, ultimately you got to feed yourself and your family. My biggest advice to them is always, no matter what, if you choose to cross that line into profession, you have to treat it like a business. You cannot make decisions based off of just emotion or feeling. You can make those business decisions based off emotion and feeling, but it's still a business decision. I see too many guys get into it, treat it as a way to get paid from their hobby. They generally don't succeed in the long term. It's the guys that look at it and realize there's numbers involved, there's taxes involved. The passion will carry itself. That's there. That's a given. But you've got to have the business side of it at the forefront of all your decision making, of everything you do when earning that money. This industry is an old boy industry, whether they like to admit it or not. And I do see a lot of the younger people coming into the industry have a little bit more of that business sense. You really need that if you want to make this a long-term gig.
Having people in our lives that look like us, who share that passion, is also really important. And I didn't realize, and neither did my co-founder when we started Ubuntu, realize just how common that is across the board, across the country. Black and brown fly anglers and people in the business go, man, I didn't know you exist. I didn't know you before. Can we get together? And we meet up and fish together. That's something that we're trying to do, not the business side of it, but creating a family, creating a community.
I think that's an important note. Having been in this industry for been a while now, it's going on like 18 years. I've always, and it's how I was raised and my upbringing and my story. I kind of look at this as a giant pool of fly fishermen, the big community, right? For the most part, And I believe this is in general with all humans. For the most part, I believe that humans are still good. I believe that the few occasional crazy bad ones make it bad for everybody. Whether it's accepting or denying it, the bottom line for me, it's been this way for as long as I can remember. In this kind of industry where we don't see a lot of people like us, when we do, it just happens. Very rarely will it be like you see someone on the river or at a show or something, and you give them the what's up and they don't do it back. Right? Rarely. It happens. It happens.
Of course, yes.
But rarely do you look over and you give them the nod and they immediately know what that nod means.
Yeah.
And for us in fly fishing, with the ceiling of a population and the ceiling being so low as it is with fly anglers in general, and then to throw in, oh, in Texas, do you know so-and-so? Of course I do.
Of course I do.
That's like going to the average guy and being like, oh, you're from Texas. You know Bob? Right?
Yeah.
So, but in our circumstance, that's our reality.
Yes.
So the first time we talked, it's like, wait, you know Dudley? How do you know Brandon? But that's important too. Good people are good people. You don't have to be an asshole about it. You don't have to be overly excited about it, but just understanding and realizing that there is a community and growing that and nurturing it. There's tremendous value there.
Can't express how much I appreciate you for all that you do and what you've done already for Ubuntu. Just who you are as a person, James. You're just an incredible human being. Big shout out, big thanks to James Park, Red Truck Fly Fishing. I hope you enjoyed the show, everyone. Thanks for listening and watching. You can find us out there on YouTube and Spotify, all those wonderful places. And we'll see you next time downriver. Thanks again, James.
Thank you, Bob. It was really fun. Thanks.